The digital art era is here. AI and art creation tools empower anyone to make it. Blockchain technologies allow anyone to own it. VR, AR, and extended reality immerse us in it. Let's talk to artists and innovators behind the visual magic. I'm your host, Roger Dickerman. Welcome to the future of art. Today, we welcome Cath Simard. Cath is a composite landscape photographer and digital artist. She creates at the intersection of reality and imagination and is quoted as saying, "I don't capture what my eyes see, I capture what my mind imagines." She is patient with her art releases, yet prolific in impact, with accomplishments across Christie's, Sotheby's, AOTM, SuperRare, and Exchange, with maybe her most notable work being a one-of-one Creative Commons exploration entitled Free Hawaii. In this interview, we talk about what drives Cath, how she sees art, and not only how she creates, but a few anecdotes from her wilderness exploration. It's a good one. Let's get to it. Cath Simard, welcome to the future of art.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have you here. I feel like we've wanted to have this dialogue for a little while, and it's finally happening.
Yeah, it's been a while. I think I took like a 1 year break of podcasts and interviews. Now I'm feeling strong and ready to answer your questions.
Amazing. Well, the first question, the only fixed question of the entire interview is this: what does art mean to you?
It's such a big question. I think to me, art means expressing my most authentic self to the world in all its aspects. So I feel like landscape photography to me, like, yes, there's the like visual aspect of capturing nature and then creating something that is a blend between nature and myself. And I believe that for me, capturing nature is not enough, which is why I do compositing. So I really like to include a part of myself in my creations, in my own personal vision. I think that, maybe the darkness and the contrast of my art can also reveal like a window to my personality. But also everything that surrounds landscape photography, being perseverant, adventurous. I feel like this is also a reflection of who I am. So art is really just my most authentic expression of myself.
Where did that come from? So just wanting to be authentic in general to that level, right? To that degree, where did that spark start?
Um, I think so. Maybe the spark started from, I don't know if it's like the introversion or like feeling always a little bit like out of place or different, but maybe there's a need to feel seen and understood. And for me, art, that's one of the many ways to do that. I do that through photography. I do that sometimes through writing, even though I always have freaking spelling mistakes. But you know what? Maybe that's also like a good representation of like my more goofy side or yeah, so maybe like this desire to be seen and understood has always been very present to me.
I've always thought that you're like this beautiful juxtaposition of personality traits where I know you refer to yourself as an introvert, but I think for somebody who maybe had never heard that reference before, if they catch you in the right moment, they might think that you're a wild extrovert, right? You're incredibly
Really?
good at carrying conversation. You're incredibly good at obviously, Twitter or X, right? This app that we've navigated for quite some time now. There's been plenty of conversations there. And I think like I'll catch you in a certain moment and think Cath has such a command of the room, the quote unquote room. She's so at peace in conversation and she knows just how to make others have a good time and how to make others see her and see her artwork. How do you feel that juxtaposition at all at times?
I think I do. So I have heard this before that I might, be an extrovert. I think it's more a matter of gaining or losing energy from being around people. And for me, what I have discovered is that in general, I do tend to lose energy. However, in context that are like maybe surrounding landscape photography or being around other creatives or other passionate people, I feel maybe a little bit more in place and with my people. So maybe that's why I tend to be a bit more extroverted with those type of people that I know we have like stuff in common and that can understand me in this way. But I actually I love people. Like I love people. It's just like a matter of recharging afterwards. So for example, in big events, I'll go back to my hotel for like at least once during the day and miss on events and stuff, but just because I know this is something I need to do for myself, and then I come back energized and maybe more social in the world. Yeah, I think there's a lot to learn from, being around like other creatives, and I really appreciate that, and that's why I always maybe like push myself a bit to be around people.
Yeah, two things. One, fun interaction when we interacted last at Art Basel. I remember us talking, and you're like, "Yeah, I deliberately ate dinner alone yesterday," and I was like, "Yeah, I deliberately took myself out to a solo brunch today." It's needed sometimes, especially at the more chaotic events. The other thing I thought of when you were talking about introversion, extroversion being mainly about energy, right? I don't know where I've heard this, but do you know the gold coin analogy or the gold coin example of
I do
introversion,
not
extroversion?
know.
It goes something like this. I'm probably going to butcher it, but if you're an introvert, you wake up in the morning with 10 gold coins and you give them away over the course of the day so that when they're gone, they're gone. And then they of course renew the next day and the next. And then the
Yep.
opposite is extroversion, where you wake up with no gold coins and you must now go out to acquire them. And you could do that endlessly, basically.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a perfect analogy. Really, it's perfect. That's exactly how I feel. And it's not a good or a bad thing. It's really more a matter of understanding yourself, but also learning to put boundaries with the people around you, right? Because I think sometimes extroverts, they don't necessarily understand that some people might need a lot of solo time. And it's just like a matter of communicating that. And over the years, I have learned to communicate that with my friends, with my family, and now they know, when I just retrieve in my room or in the corner of a room, like they know to leave me alone there. And then I come back energized and happy. And yeah, so I guess it's really a matter of communicating that, not be feeling like awkward or weird to ask for space, and just being, confident. This is who I am, this is what I need, and then just walking in the world this way.
It makes a lot of sense. Now, you handle tricky topics sometimes, right? You've gotten into the weeds of, let's say, the composite photography debate. Maybe we start there, but of course, then there's also AI. We could talk about that as well. And then there's just Cath Simard shitposting. We could talk about that as well. But but maybe let me rewind the tape. Let's focus on one lane at a time. Let's go to composite photography first. Now, this is something that you've been passionate about, obviously, for a long time. You chose that as your direction. You described it earlier in this very interview as sort of reflective of the route that you wanted to take with photography. Um, and yet, it's one of those things that others don't always understand, or I guess maybe there are quote unquote purists or people who perceive it a certain sort of way. How would you lay out composite photography? I guess let's start here. If someone were to say, Kath, what do you mean? What do you mean exactly by composite photography?
So composite photography is the act of going somewhere, so whether it's in the city or nature or whatever, and then capturing different elements and then putting them together afterwards using a software, for example, Photoshop. It is not about capturing reality. However, like sometimes I will see people capture different elements and then try to achieve a final result that is close to reality. So it's really more about getting those different pieces and then assembling it. And then the way you assemble it is really up to the artist. And I would say that maybe landscape photography, if we compare it with compositing photography, is more about the act of capturing nature in its natural state or semi-natural, but it's more about really like capturing the beauty of nature. So I think that for me, it is very clear when I do composite photography versus landscape photography. When I do landscape photography, it is really about like showcasing the reality of an adventure or a single moment in time. And then composite photography, sometimes it's a bit more about representing an entire journey. So for example, I might go on a 7-day trek and I might capture different elements along the way during this trek, and then create one final image that is a representation of the trip versus one single moment in time. So I think it really depends on the intent and why you create. So I think the why for me is really strong, is really about expressing myself. So how do I express myself in the most authentic way is through inserting my own vision and kind of like using nature to achieve my own vision versus capturing nature, if that makes sense.
It does. Do you remember the first time that that occurred to you, that instead of capturing nature in its organic form, that you were going to insert your own vision?
Very early on, actually, I think only a few months into landscape photography, I had taken a trip to the Canadian Rockies about 3 weeks, and then I created my first composite, which was a mix of canoe, lake, and mountains with a different sky. And then I just like changed the sky, posted it, and then I started receiving comments like, "Hey, this is fake, this is composite." And I'm like, "What do you mean? Like, I just created something that I liked." So I created and shared something, related to compositing, even knowing that it was like titled or defined as is. So I think it's always been very natural for me to do that. And I just decided to keep going with this direction. I have to say, maybe the beginning of my career was a bit more focused on landscape photography. Also, compositing for me requires a bit more technique, both in the field and Photoshop. So as I developed my skills, then I started compositing more. And honestly, now I feel way more fulfillment creating 21 images composites versus capturing a landscape. I still enjoy it, but I feel like it is just a better representation of my creative vision doing composite and versus landscape
As
photography.
you as you do that for longer, as you become even more proficient, do you find yourself out there on a 7 day trek observing something and automatically your brain is going already to how it may be composited with what you've experienced already?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I would even go as far as saying that the compositing starts in the research. So when I research, I will usually use Google Earth. I will use some trip reports. Sometimes there's some Facebook groups of people, they just post like phone photos of their trips just to see the kind of elements there is. Sometimes social media, sometimes I see something in a documentary. So I will see one element and already know that this is a part of the puzzle that I want to use. And then I will construct everything around. And this really works my brain in a different way, in maybe in a way that it's even like more challenging, to go on like on a 7 day trek. And then instead of just like, oh, cool, I will capture this, it's like, no, I will capture this plant. And then maybe later I will find a middle ground. And then tonight I will capture the sky. So it just, I don't know if it's kind of like the problem solving that my heavily ADHD brain loves. It's like it needs a problem to solve, and it's almost like compositing photography satisfies this need.
It's really interesting. Do you have a magic number? Like, do you have a magic number of shots that you like to work with, let's say, in a composite, or does that vary wildly depending on the experience?
It could be anywhere from two, so just very simple foreground with another sky, up until I think my latest one was 21. So let's say like 5 shots for the tree, 2 shots for the middle ground, 10 shots for the clouds, the moon, etc. I have to say, the more, I wouldn't say the better, but the more satisfying for sure. And then the more time it also takes me editing that image, because my goal for me is not necessarily to create something that looks like too surreal or too unbelievable, but something that is really at the edge of reality and imagination, and that makes the person who watch the image like question their own sense of reality. It's like, oh, is this real, or I can't really tell. And it just like triggers this, like, okay, this is maybe too good to be true. So I do like to provoke this type of emotion. So I guess the heavier the composite, um maybe the more it kind of like tricks the eye in a way.
Do you approach AI the same way? Do you approach it in a sense of still wanting to play at that? I mean, obviously, if someone understands it's AI, they know it's not quote unquote real, but it
Yeah.
still can be perceived as such.
I think so. So my experience with AI, my first experience was releasing my project Metascapes. So that was more like of a curation. And actually, if you look at those images, sometimes some people they will think at first sight that it is a photo. Um, and then in terms of like the rest of what I have been experimenting with AI, I usually will create those mock-ups showcasing my photography. And I do like when those look like very realistic and believable. So yeah, I think like with AI, for me, as long as there's transparency, I think it's totally fine. Um, when it's seen or passed on as something real or something that it isn't, I think that's where for me I draw like the line of like what is ethical and unethical. But I do like to play with the, reality, imagination line when it comes to AI for sure.
Just in talking to you now, I don't think I've considered it as pointedly as I am right now. There is such a good relationship between how you approach composite, what you want to achieve via composite, and also the same with a tooling like AI. And like you said, as long as it's disclosed, I think that debate is slowly but surely being put to rest. I think people are beginning to respect the tool, with those disclosures and move that debate productively forward. But yeah, I am just now seeing the bridge between those two things.
Yeah, yeah, and even like in other creative fields, what I have realized is that it is a line that I play with a lot, and maybe totally random topic that I'm just thinking about right now. When I was working in the fashion industry as a fashion stylist, even my styling and the photo shoots that I would organize, it wouldn't be like functional, real clothing. It would all be like more like high fashion, like not really wearable, but kind of wearable, very like surreal scenes. In yeah, so I think that like this kind of like surreal, unreal versus reality plays a lot in what I do. And I'm definitely not a purist in anything that I do. I'm always interested in the surreal element, whether it's aesthetic or the concept of it.
Let's flip it around for a second. Let's consider the person on the other side of the artwork. So the collector or the enthusiast, right? You came into Web3 and this wild concept of digital art and blockchain ownership in 2021. How would you frame that relationship? So in other words, you go through your process, you bring your authentic self, you want to achieve these outcomes, and now it's actually time to hand that artwork over to somebody else through a transaction.
Um, I think that it's very difficult to compare now versus like 2021 because it was an entirely different market. The one thing I have to say though is I feel like looking back at most of my drops and most of my releases, it always comes with an element of presentation. So for example, going to my Genesis collection, I it was 4 images. One of those images included a trip with me back to the spot. So I added something a little bit different. I did a promotional video, a page on a website describing. So I really try each release to be very detailed and mindful, and the presentation really matters to me. So, maybe you call this marketing. Maybe it is, but for me, it's really more about like the presentation of what you're trying to communicate. And then when it comes to relationships, I think I took like 4 months before releasing anything in the space. So I really like build those connections, ask for advice, really think through how to release that. So maybe that's something I do with a lot of my releases, just really thinking through each release and not necessarily catching on to the trends. And also possibly sometimes following through with crazy projects or projects that are maybe a little bit more difficult to understand, such as the AI commission, which is when I went to China. I think this was a project that was just a little bit more complicated than the classic, single image release. It's like, okay, the collector needs to create a piece of AI that will act as inspiration for me to go out in the world and then kind of like recreate this piece. So that was definitely more risky, and it took a lot of, planning and also like marketing around this. But yeah, so I would say like the marketing and the details and making sure that the story and the intent is well communicated for each release is really important for me.
I think it's a beautiful pairing with Web3, with really the core collaborative element of it, where I think everyone is meeting in the middle, figuring it out together, wanting to understand a little bit more about one another and how those pieces interrelate. So I think you just so naturally stepping in and whatever you want to call it, sure, marketing, yes, absolutely, but also contextual around your artwork itself. I think it's almost like table stakes now in Web3 art. It's like you kind of, except for rare cases, almost need to bring that kind of an element to the table.
Yeah, and I think even more now in 2024, we're just not in the same market. So each piece, I would say, needs like intensive um maybe work around the release. Like I would say like it's more and more difficult to just release a beautiful piece of art, randomly. Like I think the everything that goes around it is more and more important.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I'm just trying to I'm going back through in my own mind the course of your career, and I like that you said you don't just play into trends, that you do the back work. I think that's very felt. I think even take an example of Above the Noise, right? That piece that was released in the worst of markets, that was released in the worst of times. You decided to just do it, and
Yeah.
you put the artwork out there, and you kept telling the story, and you kept telling the story, and there were prints involved, and there were all of those contextual elements you mentioned. I don't know that I've ever been more impressed by Cath Simard than during that release specifically.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It was definitely very scary to do that. And I have been holding off releasing any more like large editions pretty much up till Trillion Star Hotel, which was a year and a half before, but I just felt like it was time. And I think we were so used to instant sellouts that anything that wouldn't be an instant sellout would possibly seen as a failure. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to follow my instinct here and keep pushing and offer those prints. Because I think that image printed looks amazing. And I think it sold out within like 3 weeks or something around that. And got over 50 orders for the prints. And for me, it's like, well, like there's still a way to support artists that you appreciate, even in the bear market. And I have still been collecting in the bear market as well. So yeah, I think taking risk is important. Also being mindful of your supply. So like I'm not saying, releasing big editions every 2 months. I think this was very strategic for me as well to wait a long time. But yeah, I really appreciate you saying this because it was very stressful and a huge risk, but I'm very happy I took it.
Yeah, I mean, if you look over your career, you go back to your original one of ones, and you go back to some selective collaborations. You didn't have a lot of work out there. You referenced Trillion Star Hotel, your first edition. You do wait all that time till the next one. So it was more a matter of like, hey, I'm going to do this. That's how it felt to me. Just,
Yep.
hey, it's time. Like I don't really care. I'm just going to do this because it's time within my own journey,
Yeah,
and you'll get it or you won't, and that's fine. And I'll just keep walking it forward. And I think I resonate a lot with that. Hey, I just did a 24 hours of art release that took 36 days to sell out. So, you know,
that's
I
it.
I am very much aligned with that philosophy.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's important. And I think it's like now we just need to readjust to the reality of this market. And again, it's if it doesn't sell out instantly, it doesn't mean like it's a failure. It just means that, it needs a little bit more time and more, talk to more people about it and maybe a little bit more of like marketing and promotion. And that's totally fine. It's still a success.
Yeah, I think it also speaks to the type of collector that gravitates to a certain kind of release where I mean,
Yeah.
listen, we've all seen and maybe even been involved in things and released things within peak bull markets. And we know the fury that sometimes comes along with that, the speculative element that comes along with that. And by the way, it is what it is, right? It's, bull or bear, it's just what the times bring you. And during peak bull, what comes on the other side of that is maybe people picking up artworks that don't necessarily want that artwork. They just want the speculative high, and then they're looking to sell that artwork to somebody else. The reverse with Above the Noise, when that happens, by virtue of you taking those 3 weeks to keep churning along, you're most likely finding the exact right people who do want that artwork and do see themselves, collecting it and holding it for quite some time.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with that. It was a beautiful experience and I would do it again for sure.
So let's go another place within collecting, I should say. Free Hawaii. One of the hallmark moments of your journey here, and that of course is you declaring this CCO. This is now usable by anybody, anytime, any place. And I guess that somehow that's in some way ties into the controversial elements that you like to lean into from time to time, engaging within the composite debate, the AI debate, and then here you are with CCO. And by the way, now even I think that's become a little bit more acceptable, and that debate's been moved forward productively. Not so when you release the Free Hawaii.
No, when I released it, oh my God, I got so much I don't want to say hate, but let's just say it got a lot of controversy. I remember there were spaces organized saying that I wanted to destroy the photography space with my idea, and it was all very interesting to see how people were reacting to this. And I think like at first it was a little bit shocking, but I think the main thing that people forgot is that this is something I was doing for myself. I wasn't telling anyone to do shit. Like everyone is entitled to do whatever they want with their rights. And now I think, like you said, like afterwards, 2 years later, now it's way more accepted to release artwork as CCO. I have to say though that so this idea, there were like two main points in this idea. The first one was to basically by letting go of the control that I would be regaining control. And then, so basically like taking back ownership of my artwork, but in the sense of releasing it as an NFT and then just letting go of people using it. Because I think this is something that photographers are very concerned all the time. Like, one person is using my image, another person, it's exhausting to follow everything. So really, refocusing the entire kind of like value of it as an NFT is a way to lower this anxiety and stress about what other people could do with it. So that's like a practice of, again, just like letting go. And then the second point is that the more an image is everywhere, the more an image is widespread, the more it actually increases the original, like where is the original? And here it's the one of one NFT. So we've seen like some people leaning into this. We see like derivatives contests all the time to pump up the value of an artwork or whatever. So I think now it's well accepted, but definitely in the moment, I have to say it was a few months of like trying to explain myself, but really I didn't have to. It was just like a crazy idea that I decided to follow through and just do it. And again, follow my instinct. And once again, I think it paid off, and I'm really happy with how this project went.
Was there anything surprising that came after your declaration and release? Anything surprising over because now some time has passed since then. What came your way that you were not expecting as a result of that decision?
Um, I think just seeing so many projects like releasing stuff as CCO, like PFP projects. And it was interesting because like a lot of people were kind of shocked by this, but it was not entirely new. So I think what's surprising for me now is that it's so much accepted. It's like, okay, yeah, I see a lot of PFP, but also art projects, releasing art as CCO, and artists now are like perfectly comfortable with that. So maybe like what's just really interesting is seeing like the controversy and hate to complete acceptance and even pushing this into the narrative within only 2 years. But I think CCO is really well, I think it is really well aligned with Web3. And maybe just like one note is, so Free Hawaii Photo is not actually entirely CCO. It is an open license, and then the term CCO came after. So again, I kind of like did an idea, released something without even knowing the repercussions or like the real bigger picture behind this. So I would say like this reveal went after the release of the project, not even during, which was pretty cool to see.
Oh, I didn't know that context actually. It's interesting.
Yeah, it was really more like of this crazy idea, let's move forward. Like we think this is good for this reason. And then, now it's like, okay, well, actually it is like really part of Web3 and well aligned. So, don't want to pretend that, this was like a, prophetic genius idea. It was more like of a chance that we took to do something different, which afterwards turned out to be well applied to Web3.
Sometimes that's how it happens, right? You open a door, don't know what's on the other side. Could fall
Exactly.
flat. Could fall flat. Could be a prophetic genius of an idea.
Exactly. And even sometimes you will do stuff in the moment and it won't be considered a genius idea before 5 years later. So that's why I like to take risks, and I like to perhaps go beyond just the creation of an image. I like to play with rights, play with the commission aspect, with how I'm releasing stuff. And I think that's important. And I think that Web3 is like a perfect place to experiment and do that.
It's like a sandbox.
Yeah.
So, okay, give me one example of when it went wrong. It could be a small example, medium or large, doesn't matter. But what's one example of when it went wrong? When maybe you opened a door, you tried something, and it just didn't work out.
It didn't work out. Um,
You're like,
God.
Roger, I'm batting 100. Don't ask me that question.
You mean like for Free Wi Photo or like any other
Oh, and
project?
anything, broadening out to the totality of either your experience in Web3 or if you want to go even broader, just your career as a whole.
So I'm gonna give an example that at first didn't work out, but will probably end up working out. Um, so back in June 2022, I was in Peru and I had this idea of filming a trek and the creation of an image from start to finish. So from the research and then going to Peru, acclimatization, and then doing the trek and explaining what I'm doing, and then getting the shot, coming back, showing the editing. And I did all of this and I realized that I'm really not comfortable in front of a camera. And then while filming the trek, I just felt awkward the entire time. And we had a script which I was desperately trying to follow, and it just didn't feel natural. Like there were other moments that were more natural that were captured, but I came back from this trip with videos that I was like, what the hell am I gonna do with this? Because I don't even know if I feel comfortable sharing this. And also, honestly, I looked back at the images that I had captured. I think in the moment I felt like I had captured something, but I came back and I just didn't really connect with my work. So I realized that with the pressure of leading a project, the camera, having to explain what I'm doing, it really got me outside of my creative zone, and it prevented me from creating something that I like and that I truly connect with. And I know this about me, like I always create my best work when I'm alone. And here I took a risk, having other people so I can showcase the journey, which I think a lot of people want to see, but it actually compromised the quality of the work that I did. So I left everything in this hard drive for a year. I was like, I'm just not gonna think about it. Like, yes, I have spent a lot of money, energy, everything on this project. I'm just gonna let it sit. And about a year later, I was like, you know what? Maybe I should just get it edited and let the videographer edit it, create something and see what happens. And you know, this is just gonna be an awkward video of me showcasing my process, and it's not going to be attached to any release. It's really just going to be like to show you know, the journey behind the image. And then got it edited, and I got the first draft a week ago, and I'm really happy. I'm really happy with it. So I think this is just like, sometimes there are projects that don't feel great in the moment, or you feel like it's a complete loss, you know, in all sides. And sometimes those projects, they just need to sit a little bit, and you disconnect with the stress and the anxiety of what went wrong, and then you can have a fresh perspective on this, and then you can make something new out of it. So I am doing something new out of this, which will be released this year. But I think this is a great example of something that went wrong, and honestly, it didn't feel great in the moment, doing all of this for like, well, nothing.
So a year later, you hand it off to the editor. You get it back just a week ago. What stuck out to what was the positive there? Did anything surprise you about the edit? You know, something that felt so awkward and uncomfortable and sort of took you out of your zone while you were away. Now looking back on that video, yeah, what was the shining positive there?
I think is the acceptation of who I am as a person, because I can be very imperfect, very goofy, you know. English is my second language. Sometimes I struggle. And I think just like letting go of that pressure and seeing myself with like those fresh eyes really helped me to actually even appreciate the work that I have put into this. So I was like, well, you know what? I'm really not that awkward. It's really not that bad. I'm actually explaining pretty well what I'm doing. Um, so just like overall, it was way better than what I had imagined and anticipated, because I think sometimes when you go into, you know, everything's wrong, you're overthinking everything, you have this such dark and negative image of a project when things go wrong, that it's difficult to get outside of it. So I really think that here the key was to take space with that and then come back to it. So that was really, really positive. And now I'm like, this is me. You guys are gonna see what I'm doing. And yeah, it's gonna be fun, and now I'm actually excited to showcase the film. So it's gonna be very fun.
And you'll share it out for everyone?
Yeah, currently discussing and projecting it during NFT NYC. So that's gonna be even bigger than just sharing a link and hoping nobody sees it. I'm like, nah, I'm going all in. I want everyone to see it, and I think it's gonna be very outside of my comfort zone, but I do want to keep pushing myself as an artist, and pushing myself to be a bit more in the front, I think is essential for my career, communicating my art, and just like pushing myself as an artist, because I tend to stay behind, you know, and not take interviews. And so that's something I do want to improve.
Casting your eyes down that road. So putting yourself in front and
Yeah.
pushing those kinds of situations out 5, 10, 20, 25 years. What would you like your career to be defined by?
Um, I think for me, the first thing that pops into my mind is to keep going further in terms of the wilderness. I have a passion for the wilderness and for places that are unexplored. So I would love to keep pushing, yes, like my art, yes, composite photography, but I would like to just like continue to be maybe a little bit more high level in the exploration side. So, you know, maybe doing some mountaineering and really capturing places that haven't been photographed before. I think I would like that. So yes, a photographer, but also maybe in the line of like an explorer. And storytelling as well, and communicating some of the life lessons that I learned on those trips in different ways. So whether it's through my art or other projects, which you will see in 2024 as well. But I just want to inspire people to get outside and outside of their comfort zone. And that brings me a lot of joy to do that. So maybe it's not like crazy, but I think finding a way to keep doing my art in a sense that I can keep improving myself and keep growing, that would be my number one thing for like the projection in the future.
What comes along? So I want to ask you about the word sacrifice, because what's very clear to me when you observe your work, sometimes that's not immediately apparent, because sometimes it's a beautiful image, whether it's a raw image, a composite image, doesn't matter. I think you're taking us someplace, but it's typically it has beautiful elements to it. But when you think a beat longer, and then sometimes you'll share something on your socials, sometimes you will share a process shot, or maybe a glimpse behind the scenes of that. It's quite clear there's a lot of sacrifice that it takes to both get on site, go deeper and deeper and deeper into the wilderness, wherever that may be, whether it's climb, whether it's elevation, or whether it's going into some place. What comes along with that from a time perspective, from a training perspective, wherever you want to go with that question?
Yeah, I do feel that there's a lot of sacrifice with what I do. For me, like my art is it's my obsession. It's my entire world. Like everything I do and everything I am is literally like that. To a point where, I will neglect other things in my life. Like I have learned now to balance a little bit more like friendships and have making time for other people, my family. But before that, I mean, I can go like 3 months without seeing a human and just like focused on either editing or being outside and hiking and creating. It's it is a sacrifice, but it's also like borderline obsession. And I when I like something, I always go like all in. So um I think that in terms of time, most of my time is really focused around my art more than anything else. Also, you mentioned the fitness, like I have to stay fit, I have to train to be able to do those hikes. Like carrying a backpack for 7 days, going up and down, and literally like a bag that's like half your weight, like you have to be strong to do that. And sometimes, you're on the trail and you only sleep 2 hours a night and you need to keep going. And so those are, sacrifices, but maybe a little bit more just like pushing yourself mentally and physically. There's also the maybe risk side of this, which is for example, when I went to Tasmania, I was there for 5 weeks for one shot. And I booked my ticket back to Canada when I got the first final element of the composite. So like there's a risk of like spending maybe too much time or investing too much into something that might not even happen. So maybe the sacrifices are just like huge risks that you take, both physically, financially, like the time. But at the end of the day, for me, it's always worth it. Like I'm driven by that. Like I love the discomfort. I research the discomfort as well. It's something I'm very, very comfortable with. But there's also the aspect of growth that I have mentioned that I feel is a really driving motor for me in all aspects of my life. I love doing hard things that help me grow and just like better myself. So those sacrifices for me, they are necessary. I accept them, I embrace them. But I agree that maybe there is a need of education when it comes to educating people about those types of sacrifice that goes behind like landscape photography, nature photography, and other types of photography as well. And that's by communicating with those artists and getting to learn their process. And honestly, sometimes you will be like surprised how much an artist can put into their work. Like for me, when I have conversations with other artists, I'm like, wow, you really spend 3 weeks like creating this. So that's very impressive. And I think it should be talked about more for sure.
I agree. And then context and story is what makes my world go round. And I always enjoy that stuff. I mean, obviously, I love the art. It is what draws me in. But then my mind immediately goes to the how, why, and listen, sometimes it's fine to get back on the other side. I can't tell you, or I don't want to tell you. I'd rather you come to those conclusions yourself. And that's fine. And that's a great answer. But I'm always asking those types of questions. So I appreciate the
Yeah, and
process.
maybe just to add, I think that so that's something we talk a lot, like in the landscape photography space. I don't think that sacrifices or hard work necessarily define the value of an artwork. Like it does, like so there's a Jay, I think it's Jay, he gave this example. It's like if you climb to the top of Everest and you take a shit photo, it's still a shit photo. So I don't think that efforts necessarily define the value of an artwork, but it's just part of the story without adding or subtracting value. It's just like an added bonus, I would say, to help understand the artwork better.
I'm with you. And I also want to add the mental framework that I've always found attractive. It's like if you find yourself or you find your calling, and you can have multiple callings, but you find your callings when everything performed to a high enough level comes with some form of pain or sacrifice. It's just what being human and progressing usually means, right? But you find your calling when the pain or sacrifice that comes with that particular path is more acceptable to you than 99% of the rest of the population. So it's
Yep.
just very clear when you talk about your form of sacrifice along the way that you're very much at peace with it. It's just part of what it is, and it's necessary, as opposed to something you view as maybe a negative or a huge
Yeah.
risk.
Yeah, it's never a negative, and even if it's a risk, is like it's a positive risk. It's always, to me, it's always worth it. Like I wouldn't do all of that stuff if it wasn't worth it. And what I have learned about myself is that this need to create and like pursue those composite shots is like it's primal. I need that to literally survive in this world, because it keeps my brain and working in creative ways, and it's almost like a meditation healing. It's like there's a lot of benefits for me to do that.
What's one time, whether you're in Tasmania, you're somewhere, one time that you were out there and you were running on no sleep and you said, "That's it, I'm done. It's over."
um I'm gonna say Tasmania was really close because I was out there by myself for 8 days. And the 2 first days, it was beautiful weather, and I was actually hoping to capture one specific viewpoint with the lake and some mountains. And I slept on the ridge for, I believe, 4 nights. And every single day it was raining, and like crazy rain with, I got stuck in my tent for like 4.5 days, and I was like, what the hell am I doing this? I was really going crazy, didn't see another human on the trail. Like it was, I'm like, why? I'm just gonna walk back to the parking and call someone. I was really close to calling it off. And then I decided to stay up until the very last night. And then the very last night, the sky cleared up and I was able to capture what I needed. So I have to say that specific moment nearly drove me crazy. I was like, I'm over this. Like, why am I doing this? I'm flying back to Canada. I'm done. That was pretty tough for me. But I have to say, it was one of the only moments. Usually when I'm out in the mountains, I get insane energy. Even like on 2 hours of sleep, even on little food, I will be hiking 60 kilometers, no problem. And I've done that actually. I did a 60 kilometers trek with all of my gear, only one protein bar, reached a viewpoint, took a shot, slept in a cave for 2 hours, and then took another shot and then hiked back another 30K. And I was like, oh, that was okay. So it was not, I mean, my body was sore, but I was able to find this energy because I think doing things that I'm very passionate about, and I'm sure many people identify, it gives you energy, it gives you dopamine. So I can sustain myself this way. But I have to say, when you get stuck in your tent for 4 days, that's when maybe like it's a little bit more depressing. I have to say that stuff for sure.
I know every pound in the pack probably matters an awful lot, but I mean, do you keep any entertainment? Do you bring a book? Do you bring anything that will keep you busy during that 4.5 day stint?
So the only entertainment that I usually bring is a couple of Netflix episodes downloaded on my phone. but it takes phone battery and I need to preserve the battery. I only have a few battery packs. I need my Garmin InReach to be functional. I need my phone to be functional for alarms and stuff. So even that form of entertainment is very difficult. Like I can't do more than like maybe a couple of hours per day. So yeah, like I just sometimes I'll just lay there and think about things and or have a little walk in the rain around my tent and entertain myself. It's like a forced way to slow down in a way. It's like a forced meditation outside of connection, like phone, social media. And like the first few days is usually quite difficult because that's when you can actually feel the addiction that most of us have for social media. Like I'll find myself like getting my phone and Twitter. Oh, fuck, that's true. I don't have internet. But yeah, the first few days are a little bit difficult, but there's a point where you just like go past this and your brain adjusts to the lack of stimulation, which is also very difficult for ADHD. We need to be stimulated at all times. But I think it's very beneficial. I always come back from those trips like energized and relaxed and positive. It always has an insane positive effect on my mood as well and my mental clarity, and that lasts like for a couple of weeks after. So it's tough at first and then it gets easier and then you get the benefits after.
So you come back from a trip, clear, relaxed, positive. Where does the shit posting come in?
The shit posting is always there. The shit posting, that's my second personality. I don't know, like I feel like humor is a huge part of my life. My family is very funny. My brother is really funny. I love to have friends that are funny. So I think it's just like part of, yeah, part of my personality. And I know I can be very serious, like when I talk about my work or other stuff, but I think sometimes it's just nice to break it off. And um it's almost a way to show a bit of like vulnerability and maybe like authenticity, and that's something I love to lean on, um even if it's like that's awkward or yeah, I think it's important.
I think so too. And especially as somebody who, like you said, is so serious about the work, the sacrifice that it takes, sharing all the contextual elements, all the process behind. Yeah, being able to kick back and have a little fun. I think it's very well received on the other side.
Yeah, it's good for the ego as well, like self-depreciation is best. I love it.
Keeps everything in check.
Yeah.
Cath, who should be on the future of art next?
Good question. I really love Ines.
Mm-hmm.
What's her last name? Reichlich. Cannot pronounce Ines. So she has this skin condition that like leaves trace on her body, and I actually most recently collected a piece from her. I am so impressed with her, the quality of her work and her story. I think she would be great to have for sure, and she seems like an incredible person as well.
That was the recent Nifty Gateway release.
Yep. Yep.
Very, very striking shot.
Amazing. Yeah. Very different, very original. Like, I think for me, uniqueness and originality is very important in the artworks that I collect. And for me, that was like you said, striking. It makes you stop and stare in the details. And also, if you go check out the rest of her body of work, incredible. Every one shot after another. So I think she would be amazing.
All right, great recommendation. Going to get that one done, hopefully. Ines, if you're listening, yeah, let's do it. And then, Cath, where can people find you? If people are just getting to know you through this interview or they want to learn more, where would you send them?
Mostly Twitter. I think Twitter, that's where I'm the most active. Sometimes, DMs can be a little bit difficult. So if you want to make sure you can catch my attention, you can just email me. I do take my emails. Yeah, so Twitter and emails, I would say, are the best place.
Or shitpost you.
Or shitpost. Yeah, if you leave a very original like shitpost comment, there's a good chance I will join your podcast or interviews. So that would be like a sure way to catch my attention.
Cath, I feel like as you keep pushing boundaries and your career keeps going to exactly the place that you want it to go, which I absolutely believe it will, and your attention is people are going to be after that, right? Especially the rise of digital art. I think that we all feel is inevitable. I think the only way that people will be able to get you is via the right shitpost. It will become a more exclusive competition.
You know what? I think that's genius. I will close my DMs, and from now on, I will be like, if you want to catch my attention, you just like make the greatest shit post ever and guaranteed. So there you go. You have
Perfect.
solved all of my problems.
Cath Simard, this was an absolute pleasure. Great to have you on the Future of Art. I hope some more months and years pass and we find our way back for another milestone.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And that was a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening and for being part of the Future of Art. If you liked the episode, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite platform, and onward to the many conversations that await us. The Future of Art is produced by Artifex. Artifex, Artifex, was created to honor today's top digital fine artists in 3 dimensions. Each artist's one-of-one work of art becomes a collectible 3D sculpture and centerpiece of an immersive world built in Unreal Engine, the creation tool of Epic Games. Search Artifex Viewer on Apple and download our brand new free app to experience the sculptures in augmented reality. And visit artifex.art/unreal to literally step inside the art on your browser.